The golden spires of Astoria Castle gleamed under the afternoon sun as Lady Helena Vance adjusted her emerald silk gown one final time. Tonight's grand harvest banquet was the most anticipated event of the season, bringing together nobility from across the Seven Kingdoms. As the wife of Duke Edmund Vance, Helena had attended dozens of royal gatherings, but this one felt different. The air itself seemed charged with tension. Helena had married into the Vance family 5 years ago, hoping to bridge the growing divide between the old noble houses and the progressive faction led by Crown Prince Alexander. Her husband Edmund, though kind-hearted, lacked the political acumen needed to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. Helena had quickly learned that survival in Astoria required more than just good breeding and proper etiquette. The kingdom of Astoria had been ruled by the Montrose dynasty for 3 centuries, but recent years had brought unprecedented challenges. King Marcus Montrose, now in his 70s, had grown increasingly frail, leaving much of the kingdom's governance to his eldest son, Prince Alexander. The prince's modernist views had earned him both devoted followers and bitter enemies among the traditional nobility. Helena's relationship with Prince Alexander had always been cordial, perhaps even warm. They shared similar views on education, reform, and trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms. However, her connection to the prince had created friction with other court ladies, particularly those aligned with the conservative faction led by Lord Chancellor Reginald Blackwood. As Helena made her way through the castle's marble corridors, she noticed the unusual number of guards stationed at every entrance. The Royal Guard, distinctive in their crimson and gold uniforms, stood at attention with an alertness that suggested something beyond normal protocol. Captain James Thornfield, a man whose loyalty to the crown was unquestioned, nodded respectfully as she passed. The great hall had been transformed into a magnificent dining space, with long tables arranged in careful hierarchical order. Hundreds of candles cast dancing shadows on the stone walls, while tapestries depicting Astoria's greatest military victories provided a backdrop of historical grandeur. The head table, reserved for the royal family and their most honored guests, dominated the far end of the hall. Helena found her assigned seat at the third table, a position that reflected her family's respectable but not exceptional status within the nobility. She exchanged pleasantries with other guests, noting the subtle undercurrents of conversation. Whispers about trade disputes with the Kingdom of Valdris mixed with gossip about potential marriage alliances and speculation about the king's declining health. Lord Chancellor Blackwood entered the hall with his characteristic air of stern authority. A man in his 60s with silver hair and penetrating gray eyes. Blackwood represented the old guard of Astorian politics. He believed in traditional values, strict adherence to ancient protocols, and maintaining the existing power structures that had served the kingdom for generations. His faction viewed Prince Alexander's reforms as dangerous departures from proven wisdom. The tension between progressive and conservative factions had been building for months. Prince Alexander's proposal to establish new trade routes through the disputed Thornwood region had met fierce resistance from traditionalists who preferred the established, albeit more expensive, southern passages. Similarly, his support for allowing merchant families to purchase minor titles had scandalized hereditary nobles who viewed such practices as threats to their ancestral privileges. Helena observed the careful choreography of court politics as guests took their seats. Allies sat together, potential rivals were strategically separated, and neutral parties found themselves positioned to serve as buffers between opposing factions. The seating arrangement itself was a complex diplomatic document, revised multiple times to avoid inadvertent slights or unintended messages. As the evening progressed, Helena noticed Prince Alexander engaged in quiet conversation with his closest advisors. The prince, a man of 32 with the characteristic Montrose features of dark hair and intelligent blue eyes, carried himself with the confidence of someone born to rule. Yet Helena had observed moments of uncertainty in his expression, the weight of future kingship evident in his thoughtful demeanor. The first course arrived with appropriate ceremony, served by liveried footmen who moved with practiced precision. Conversations gradually grew louder as wine began to flow, but Helena sensed an underlying restraint. Important discussions were being postponed, significant announcements delayed as if everyone present was waiting for some crucial development. Lady Margaret Blackwood, the Lord Chancellor's daughter, approached Helena's table during a brief intermission between courses. Margaret, a woman of sharp intelligence hidden behind a facade of conventional femininity, had long been rumored as a potential bride for Prince Alexander. Her presence at Helena's table was unusual and immediately drew attention from nearby guests. Their conversation began with standard pleasantries about fashion and weather, but Helena detected subtle probing beneath Margaret's innocent questions. References to Helena's recent visits to the royal library, her attendance at Prince Alexander's policy discussions, and her husband's voting record in the noble council suggested that the conservative faction was gathering intelligence about potential threats to their influence. The evening's entertainment began with a performance by the royal musicians, their melodic arrangements providing a sophisticated backdrop to ongoing conversations. However, Helena noticed that Prince Alexander seemed distracted, frequently glancing toward the main entrance, as if expecting someone's arrival. His behavior was subtle enough to escape casual observation, but Helena's years at court had taught her to read such signs. Captain Thornfield appeared at the prince's side, delivering what appeared to be a brief but significant message. The prince's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, and he exchanged quick glances with his senior advisor, Sir Thomas Carey. Helena realized that whatever news had been delivered was important enough to require immediate attention, despite the formal nature of the evening's proceedings. The atmosphere in the Great Hall began to shift subtly. Conversations became more guarded, and several guests excused themselves for brief departures, only to return looking troubled or preoccupied. Helena recognized the signs of crisis management, the careful coordination of responses to unexpected developments that characterized court life during turbulent periods. As the second course was served, Helena noticed that one of the seats at the high table remained conspicuously empty. The place setting remained undisturbed, suggesting that a guest who had been expected had failed to arrive. The absence was too significant to be coincidental, particularly given the evening's importance and the careful attention paid to protocol and precedence. The missing guest was Lady Cordelia Ashworth, widow of the late Duke of Ravenshollow, and one of the most influential women in the kingdom. Lady Ashworth commanded respect through both her vast personal wealth and her extensive network of political alliances. Her absence from such a significant gathering was unprecedented and immediately noticeable to those familiar with court hierarchy. Helena had known Lady Ashworth for several years and found her to be a woman of remarkable intelligence and subtle political skill. Unlike many court ladies who wielded influence through their husbands or male relatives, Cordelia had built her power base through careful cultivation of relationships, strategic financial investments, and an almost supernatural ability to anticipate political developments. The empty chair at the high table represented more than just a social slight. It signaled a potentially serious disruption in the delicate balance of court politics. Lady Ashworth's support had been crucial in securing passage of several recent initiatives, and her opposition could effectively block many of Prince Alexander's proposed reforms. Sir Thomas Carey, the prince's most trusted advisor, discreetly approached several key guests throughout the evening, engaging in brief conversations that appeared casual but clearly served specific purposes. Helena observed these interactions with growing concern, recognizing the signs of damage control and crisis management that had become all too familiar in recent months. The Kingdom of Astoria faced numerous external pressures that made internal political stability crucial. The neighboring Kingdom of Valdres had been making increasingly aggressive moves toward disputed territories along their shared border. Trade negotiations with the maritime republics to the south had stalled over disagreements about tariffs and shipping rights. Most concerning of all, reports from the northern provinces suggested that harsh winters and poor harvests might require significant royal intervention to prevent widespread hardship. Prince Alexander's modernist policies were designed to address these challenges through increased efficiency, expanded trade relationships, and more flexible governance structures. However, traditionalists argued that such changes weakened the fundamental institutions that had made Astoria strong and stable for centuries. The debate was not merely academic. It would determine the kingdom's future direction and the fate of thousands of citizens. Elena's own position in this political landscape was complicated. Her marriage to Duke Edmund had been arranged to strengthen ties between their families, but over time it had evolved into genuine affection and partnership. Edmund's political views were generally moderate, supporting reasonable reforms while respecting traditional values. However, his influence was limited, and Helena had gradually assumed responsibility for their family's political strategy. Lady Margaret Blackwood's earlier approach had been more significant than initial appearances suggested. Helena realized that her conversation with Margaret had been a form of diplomatic reconnaissance, an attempt to gauge the Vance family's likely position on upcoming votes in the Noble Council. The timing suggested that important decisions were imminent, possibly before the council's next scheduled session. The third course arrived with less fanfare than previous offerings, as if the kitchen staff sensed the growing tension in the Great Hall. Conversations had become more subdued, and Helena noticed several guests departing early with polite but transparent excuses. The careful social choreography of the evening was beginning to unravel. Captain Thornfield reappeared, this time approaching Lord Chancellor Blackwood directly. Their conversation was brief but intense, conducted in whispers that nonetheless conveyed urgency. Blackwood's expression remained carefully neutral, but Helena caught a momentary flash of satisfaction in his eyes that suggested the news was favorable to his faction's interests. Prince Alexander rose from his seat, raising his wine goblet in what appeared to be preparation for the traditional toast to the kingdom's prosperity. However, instead of the expected ceremonial words, he delivered a brief but pointed statement about the importance of unity during challenging times. His remarks, while diplomatic in language, carried clear implications about recent political developments. The prince's speech was met with polite applause, but Helena noted the varying degrees of enthusiasm among different groups of guests. Supporters of the progressive faction responded with genuine warmth, while traditionalists offered the minimum courtesy required by protocol. The division was becoming increasingly visible, despite everyone's efforts to maintain proper decorum. Following the toast, several high-ranking nobles approached the head table for private conversations with the prince and his advisors. These discussions, conducted in full view of the assembled guests but beyond hearing range, served multiple purposes. They allowed for essential coordination while simultaneously demonstrating political alignments to the broader court. Helena found herself increasingly concerned about the implications of the evening's developments. The absence of Lady Ashworth, combined with the obvious tension between factions, suggested that a significant political crisis was unfolding. The kingdom could ill afford internal discord given the external pressures it faced, yet the divisions seemed to be deepening rather than healing. Duke Edmund returned to their table after a brief absence, his expression troubled. He had been summoned for a private word with Sir Thomas Carey, and whatever he had learned had clearly disturbed him. Edmund's loyalty to the crown was absolute, but his moderate temperament made him an invaluable intermediary between competing factions. As Edmund quietly shared the substance of his conversation with Carey, Helena's concerns deepened. The situation was apparently more serious than most guests realized, involving not just political disagreements but potential threats to the kingdom's stability. Decisions made in the coming days would have far-reaching consequences for Astoria's future. The entertainment portion of the evening proceeded with performances by court musicians and a troupe of dancers, but the cultural programming felt increasingly disconnected from the real focus of attention. Guests continued their political discussions even during the performances, treating the artistic presentations as background to more pressing concerns. Helena noticed that several key figures had withdrawn to smaller chambers adjoining the Great Hall, where more sensitive conversations could be conducted away from general observation. These private meetings were clearly where the evening's real business was taking place, while the formal banquet served as convenient cover for essential political coordination. Part 3. The private conversations taking place in the adjoining chambers centered around a document that had arrived at the castle just hours before the banquet began. The message, delivered by a trusted courier from Lady Cordelia Ashworth's estate, contained information that threatened to reshape the entire political landscape of Astoria. Helena learned of its contents only through careful observation and discreet inquiries, piecing together fragments of overheard conversations. Lady Ashworth's message revealed that she had uncovered evidence of secret negotiations between certain members of the Astorian nobility and representatives of the Kingdom of Valdris. These discussions apparently involved potential territorial concessions in exchange for guarantees of non-aggression and favorable trade terms. The revelation struck at the heart of Prince Alexander's foreign policy strategy and raised serious questions about the loyalty of some prominent court figures. The implications were staggering. If accurate, the information suggested that opposition to Prince Alexander's policies was not merely based on philosophical differences about governance, but potentially influenced by foreign interests seeking to weaken Astoria's negotiating position. The distinction between legitimate political opposition and treasonous activity suddenly became crucial to the kingdom's future. Captain Thornfield's increased security measures throughout the castle now made perfect sense. The royal guard was not simply maintaining ceremonial protocol but actively protecting against potential threats to the royal family and loyal nobles. The banquet had become an opportunity to observe reactions to the allegations and identify those who might be involved in questionable activities. Helena realized that her own position made her a valuable observer for those seeking to understand the developing situation. Her marriage connections, her relationships with both progressive and conservative court figures, and her reputation for discretion made her insights particularly useful to those trying to navigate the crisis. Duke Edmund's conversation with Sir Thomas Carey had focused on the urgent need for moderate nobles to maintain stability while investigations proceeded. The kingdom could not afford to descend into paranoid accusations and political purges, yet the allegations required serious investigation. Finding the appropriate balance would test the wisdom and leadership skills of all involved. Prince Alexander's decision to proceed with the banquet despite the crisis demonstrated both political courage and strategic thinking. Canceling such an important gathering would have signaled panic and potentially triggered the very instability the kingdom sought to avoid. However, continuing the event while managing the unfolding crisis required exceptional coordination and diplomatic skill. The absence of Lady Ashworth from the banquet took on new significance in light of her message. Her decision to remain away from court suggested either concern for her personal safety or a desire to avoid becoming embroiled in the immediate political reactions to her revelations. Her absence was both a protective measure and a political statement. Lord Chancellor Blackwood's faction found itself in an increasingly difficult position. Some members of the conservative group might be innocent of any wrongdoing, while others could be implicated in the alleged negotiations with Valdres. The challenge for all concerned was distinguishing between legitimate political opposition and potentially treasonous activity. Helena observed the subtle ways in which alliances were being tested and reformed throughout the evening. Conversations became more guarded, commitments more conditional, and previously solid relationships showed signs of strain. The political landscape that had seemed stable just hours earlier was revealing unexpected fault lines. The entertainments continued, but they now served as intervals between more urgent discussions rather than the evening's primary focus. Musicians performed traditional melodies that spoke of Astoria's proud history and independence, their selections taking on new meaning in the context of allegations about foreign influence on domestic politics. Sir Thomas Carey's discreet consultations with key nobles served multiple purposes. Beyond gathering information about the allegations, he was working to maintain cohesion among those loyal to the crown, while avoiding premature accusations against those who might be innocent. The investigation would require both thoroughness and fairness to maintain public confidence in royal justice. Elena's observations suggested that the crisis was being managed with considerable skill, but the ultimate outcome remained uncertain. The kingdom's response to the allegations would determine not only the fate of those potentially involved, but also the future relationship between the crown and the nobility. Trust, once broken, would be difficult to restore. The evening's developments also highlighted the crucial role that women like Lady Ashworth played in Astoria's political system. Despite formal limitations on their official power, influential court ladies often possessed information and insights that proved vital to the kingdom's security. Their networks of relationships and communication provided intelligence that complemented official diplomatic and military sources. As the banquet entered its final phases, Helena realized that she was witnessing a potential turning point in Astoria's history. The kingdom's response to this crisis would either strengthen its institutions and unity or expose divisions that could be exploited by foreign enemies. The stakes extended far beyond court politics to encompass the fundamental question of Astoria's independence and future prosperity. The guest list for the evening had been carefully constructed to include representatives of all major noble houses and political factions. This comprehensive attendance now served an investigative purpose, allowing royal officials to observe reactions to developing events and gauge the extent of knowledge or involvement among different court figures. Prince Alexander's handling of the crisis demonstrated the leadership qualities that would be essential if he were to succeed his father as king. His ability to maintain diplomatic composure while managing a potentially explosive situation reflected both personal maturity and political sophistication. The kingdom's future would depend on such qualities in its leaders. Helena's position as an observer rather than a direct participant allowed her to appreciate the complexity of the situation facing Astoria's leadership. Simple solutions were unavailable. Every response carried risks and potential unintended consequences. The art of statecraft required balancing competing demands while protecting the kingdom's fundamental interests. Part 4. The final course of the banquet was served against a backdrop of carefully controlled tension that permeated every conversation and interaction in the Great Hall. Helena watched as Prince Alexander maintained perfect diplomatic composure while simultaneously coordinating responses to the crisis through subtle signals and discreet communications with his advisors. The prince's ability to function effectively under such pressure demonstrated the leadership qualities that would be essential for Astoria's future. Captain Thornfield's security arrangements had evolved throughout the evening, from ceremonial protection to active intelligence gathering. The Royal Guard's positioning allowed them to monitor conversations and observe reactions while maintaining the appearance of normal protocol. Several guards had been strategically assigned to positions where they could overhear discussions at key tables without appearing intrusive. Helena noticed that certain nobles had begun departing the banquet earlier than protocol typically required, offering polite excuses about early morning obligations or family commitments. These departures were carefully noted by royal officials, as the timing and manner of leaving could provide insights into individuals' knowledge of the developing situation or their comfort level with remaining under observation. The conversations at Helena's table had grown increasingly guarded as other guests became aware that significant developments were unfolding beyond their immediate knowledge. Duke Edmund's obvious concern, combined with his careful choice of words when discussing recent political events, suggested to observant dinner companions that serious matters were under consideration by the royal administration. Lady Margaret Blackwood's behavior throughout the evening had been particularly revealing. Her earlier approach to Helena's table now appeared to be part of a broader effort to assess the reactions and knowledge of various court figures. Margaret's subsequent conversations with other guests followed similar patterns, suggesting a coordinated intelligence-gathering effort by the conservative faction. The entertainment program concluded with a performance of traditional Astorian ballads that celebrated the kingdom's history of independence and resistance to foreign influence. The musical selections, while part of the planned program, took on additional significance given the evening's revelations about potential foreign interference in domestic politics. The court musicians performed with particular emotion, as if sensing the historical importance of the moment. Prince Alexander rose for a final toast of the evening, this time offering more specific remarks about the importance of loyalty, integrity, and service to the kingdom. His words, while diplomatically phrased, carried clear implications about recent developments and expectations for future conduct. The toast was received with varying degrees of enthusiasm, revealing much about the political allegiances and concerns of those present. Sir Thomas Cary's coordination of responses to the crisis had been masterful throughout the evening. By maintaining normal social protocols, while simultaneously managing intelligence gathering and damage control, he had prevented the situation from escalating into open confrontation or panic. His efforts demonstrated the importance of experienced advisors in managing complex political crises. Helena realized that the evening's events would likely lead to a significant reorganization of court relationships and political alliances. The allegations contained in Lady Ashworth's message would require thorough investigation, and the results would determine the fate of numerous noble families and their positions within the kingdom's power structure. The banquet's conclusion was managed with particular care to avoid creating opportunities for inappropriate private discussions or hasty departures that might compromise ongoing investigations. Guests were encouraged to depart in an orderly fashion, with careful attention to protocol and proper farewells. The Royal Guard maintained discreet but visible presence throughout the departure process. Duke Edmund and Helena's carriage ride back to their estate provided an opportunity for private discussion of the evening's developments. Edmund shared additional details about his conversation with Sir Thomas Cary, revealing the seriousness of the allegations and the potential consequences for those found to be involved in unauthorized negotiations with foreign representatives. The implications for Astoria's future foreign policy were profound. If some nobles had indeed been conducting secret negotiations with Valdris, it would seriously compromise the kingdom's negotiating position and potentially expose military or economic vulnerabilities to enemy exploitation. The investigation would need to determine not only who was involved, but also what information or commitments might have been shared. Elena's analysis of the evening's observations suggested that the crisis would test every aspect of Astoria's political system. The balance between royal authority and noble privileges, the relationship between traditional and progressive factions, and the kingdom's ability to maintain unity in the face of external threats would all be challenged by the developing situation. The role of women in Astoria's political system had been highlighted by Lady Ashworth's crucial intelligence, and the various ways in which court ladies had contributed to information gathering throughout the evening. Despite formal limitations on their official power, influential women often possessed unique insights and communication networks that proved vital during political crises. Prince Alexander's performance during the crisis had demonstrated his readiness for greater responsibility, but it had also revealed the enormous challenges that would face him as future king. The kingdom's complex internal politics, combined with growing external pressures, would require exceptional leadership skills and the ability to build consensus among competing factions. Elena understood that her own family's future would depend partly on their response to the developing crisis. Duke Edmund's reputation for integrity and moderation positioned them well to play constructive roles in whatever investigations and political adjustments might follow. However, the rapidly changing circumstances would require careful navigation to avoid inadvertent entanglement in dangerous political currents. The evening had ended without any dramatic confrontations or immediate resolutions, but Helena recognized that the real consequences were yet to come. The information revealed by Lady Ashworth would trigger investigations, political realignments, and potentially serious legal proceedings that would reshape Astoria's political landscape for years to come. Part 5. The weeks following the Grand Harvest Banquet transformed the political landscape of Astoria in ways that exceeded even Helena's expectations. The investigation launched by Prince Alexander and his advisors uncovered a web of unauthorized communications between certain nobles and Valdrese representatives that went far deeper than initially suspected. Lady Ashworth's intelligence had revealed only the beginning of a complex conspiracy that threatened the kingdom's fundamental security. Captain Thornfield led a discreet but thorough investigation that ultimately identified 7 prominent nobles who had participated in various forms of unauthorized contact with foreign agents. The evidence included written correspondence, testimony from trusted servants, and financial records that revealed suspicious payments and transactions. The scope of the conspiracy shocked even experienced court observers who thought they understood the extent of political divisions within the kingdom. Lord Chancellor Blackwood found himself in an increasingly untenable position as the investigation proceeded. While he had not been directly implicated in treasonous activities, several of his closest allies were among those under suspicion. His faction's credibility was severely damaged, and his ability to effectively oppose Prince Alexander's policies was significantly weakened. The political balance that had defined court life for years was fundamentally altered. Lady Margaret Blackwood's intelligence-gathering efforts during the banquet took on new significance as investigators realized that the conservative faction had been attempting to assess how much various court figures knew about the unauthorized negotiations. Her conversations with Helena and others had been part of a damage control effort that ultimately proved insufficient to contain the scandal. Prince Alexander's handling of the crisis enhanced his reputation throughout the kingdom and strengthened his position as heir to the throne. His combination of decisive action with respect for legal procedures impressed both progressive and moderate nobles, who had sometimes questioned his readiness for greater responsibility. The crisis had provided him with an opportunity to demonstrate the leadership qualities essential for future kingship. Sir Thomas Carey's coordination of the investigation and its political implications established him as one of the kingdom's most capable administrators. His ability to manage complex intelligence gathering while maintaining diplomatic relationships with nobles under suspicion demonstrated the sophisticated approach required for effective governance in troubled times. Lady Cordelia Ashworth's decision to provide crucial intelligence to the crown, despite personal risks and political costs, earned her recognition as one of Astoria's most patriotic and courageous citizens. Her network of informants and her analytical abilities had proven invaluable in protecting the kingdom's security. The incident established her as one of Prince Alexander's most trusted advisors on matters of both domestic and foreign policy. Helena and Duke Edmund found their moderate political stance vindicated by the crisis. Their consistent support for reasonable reforms, combined with respect for traditional institutions, positioned them well in the new political environment that emerged after the investigation. Edmund's reputation for integrity made him a valuable intermediary between the crown and nobles, seeking to rebuild relationships damaged by the scandal. The Kingdom of Valdres responded to the exposure of their covert operations by withdrawing their diplomatic mission from Astoria and adopting a more openly hostile stance toward their neighbor. However, their loss of influence within Astorian court circles significantly weakened their strategic position. Other neighboring kingdoms took note of Valdres's methods and adjusted their own diplomatic approaches accordingly. The trials of the implicated nobles were conducted with scrupulous attention to legal procedures and fairness, demonstrating the strength of Astoria's judicial system. 3 individuals were ultimately convicted of treason and faced severe penalties, including exile and forfeiture of titles. Others received lesser punishments based on the extent of their involvement and their cooperation with investigations. The political realignment that followed the crisis created opportunities for new voices and perspectives to influence the kingdom's governance. Younger nobles who had previously been overshadowed by established factions found themselves in positions of greater influence. The modernist agenda championed by Prince Alexander gained broader support as traditional opposition was weakened by association with treasonous activities. King Marcus, despite his advancing age and frail health, played a crucial role in maintaining stability during the crisis. His decision to support his son's investigation while ensuring fair treatment for all accused parties demonstrated the wisdom that had made his reign successful. The crisis strengthened rather than weakened the monarchy's position within Astoria's political system. The reforms that Prince Alexander had long advocated were implemented with greater ease following the crisis. New trade relationships were established with kingdoms that had previously been reluctant to deal with a potentially divided Astoria. Military defenses were strengthened through better coordination and improved intelligence gathering. The kingdom emerged from the crisis more unified and secure than it had been for years. Helena's observations during the banquet and her subsequent analysis of political developments established her reputation as one of the court's most perceptive commentators on political affairs. Her insights proved valuable to both her husband's political career and to other nobles seeking to understand the complex currents of court life. The Grand Harvest Banquet became remembered as a turning point in Astorian history, marking the end of one political era and the beginning of another. The crisis it precipitated ultimately strengthened the kingdom's institutions and prepared it for the challenges that lay ahead. Prince Alexander's succession to the throne, when it eventually occurred, was supported by a more unified and confident nobility than anyone had thought possible just months earlier. Lady Ashworth's courage in exposing the conspiracy inspired other court figures to prioritize loyalty to the kingdom over factional interests. Her example demonstrated that individual actions could have profound consequences for the nation's future. The intelligence network she had developed continued to serve the kingdom's interests for years to come, providing early warning of other potential threats. The resolution of the crisis also highlighted the importance of maintaining strong relationships between the crown and moderate nobles who could serve as bridges between competing factions. Alina and Edmund's family continued to play this role throughout Prince Alexander's eventual reign, helping to maintain the political stability that had been so hard-won through the trials that followed the memorable evening when a missing invitation revealed threats to the kingdom's very survival.